I believe it is working now. It appears to be. Very good. Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so we're going to take a look at unification of both Italy and Germany. So tell me, ladies and gentlemen, based on what you know of the 1815 to 1848 time period, are we big fans in most of Europe in terms of the leadership? Are we big fans of liberalism or nationalism or capitalism?
No.
No, those are very anti-conservative ideas, anti-Metternich ideas, anti-Congress of Vienna. What they were trying to do with the Congress of Vienna is hold together conservatism and maintain the status quo. But we see some revolutions throughout Europe during that time period that prove you can't just turn back the clock on the French Revolution, right? So tell me, what are some times when we see liberalism and nationalism happening from 1815 to 1848? Where are some locations and revolutions? Greece. So Greece, we saw exactly in the 1820s and 30s, and so they achieved their independence from which empire? The Dirty Turks, indeed, and then they get that in 1830. Okay, very good. And then who else do we see? France, indeed. And when do they do this? 1830 in the July Revolution, and then 1832, what they have?
June.
They had the June Uprising, very good. And then again, when do we see it? All right, so June and July of 1848, exactly. So we've got ourselves two revolutions, one uprising in France at this time, during that time period, that are setting the stage for nationalism and liberalism. Who is going to be brought in 1848 by an election process after the revolution is over? All right, so Louis Napoleon. Louis Napoleon will be brought in. He's who? All right, the nephew of Napoleon Bonaparte, exactly. All right, and then Italy, meanwhile, because of the 1848 revolution, they're also going to have some liberal ideas floating around. And then Germany. Did we have some issues in Germany in 1848 as well? Yeah, indeed. So Prussia, remember, they got together in Frankfurt. They established the Landtag and the Frankfurt Parliament, and they wanted to establish whom as their elected king? Not Bismarck. Frederick William IV, indeed, madam. They wanted Frederick William IV. And so did he want that crown from the gutter?
No.
Nine! No, he did not, because that was not cool. He wants to be a stuffy conservative, doesn't he? And then how does Austria and Russia feel, by the way, about a united Germany? No, they don't like it either, and so they're going to prevent that, and Frederick William IV is going to be like, yeah, whatever, I'm still king. All right, it's cool. So, we see a lot of effort moving between 1848 towards 1871 towards unification of both Italy and Germany, we'll see. But meanwhile, over in France, we've got Louis Napoleon, that's going to start to shake things up a bit and start to unify a new empire, a second empire. So, the election of 1848 is going to be important because what kind of election are we having here? Is it just the wealthy upper classes like we saw before, where it was 0.6%? No. Instead, what kind of election are we going to have? Universal male suffrage. That's why this one's such a big deal. We see universal male suffrage. Now, the fear is, with universal male suffrage, typically, how do these elections go? Are they more conservative when it's universal male suffrage? Or are they more radical? Far more radical or liberal, especially when you've got a bunch of working class poor that are voting with their stomachs and their pocketbooks, right? Because at this point we see a lot of unemployment, a lot of hunger in Paris as well. And so you've got them voting for this man for a few different reasons. First of all, you've got the Napoleonic legend. How do the lower classes especially view Napoleon Bonaparte by this time? As a god, indeed, a demigod. Yes, so they had moved his body from St. Helena and brought it to where? In Paris?
It was the
I remember.
So the Tuileries, right? So the Tuileries, I think is how you pronounce it. So they brought it back to France, brought it back with all this pomp and pageantry, put it in Paris, and so now they've got him in this cement encasement, and it's this beautiful tomb, right? And so they celebrate this like crazy.
It was the Invalids.
The Invalides. I'm sorry. Thank you. I was afraid I was wrong. I was wondering about that. So yes, the Invalides. So the Invalides is where they're going to put his body, and so therefore they're loving this, right? They're celebrating this man. And so now you've got his nephew saying, "Hey, What about me? You guys should bring me in too, because I can take care of business. And so part of the reason that the middle class likes him is because they were really afraid of that radical phase of the French Revolution that they saw before. So they were afraid they'd see more socialism again. All right, and so this guy, is he going to be on the side of the socialists? No. No. So he's perfect for France at this time because he rides that middle ground between the hero that France wants, the bourgeois type of monarch that the middle class wants, but he's also going to appeal to the working classes through a new rebuilding program for France. And so his program he'll set up in 2 different pamphlets that he's going to publish in December of 1848, right before the election. So people will be reading these things in the street. And so, for instance, we have a pamphlet called Napoleonic Ideas. And in Napoleonic Ideas, what he talks about is how we need to have a strong France. Need to have a united France that's not torn by class antagonisms, but that we need to, not side with socialism because that's only what part of the population wants. Instead, we need to set up social programs for the poor, and we need to help out, make sure that the middle class have their money, and have their rights, and have their participation in the government. So the middle class will love that idea. But then he's also going to write a little pamphlet called The Elimination of Poverty. So who's going to love reading about this one? How he wants to eliminate poverty. The urban workers. So the problem with Paris at this time is it's dirty, it's disgusting, it's still built in a medieval, unorganized fashion. So what should we do to it, maybe?
Fix it up.
How?
Give them
All right, new roads, new buildings, demolish all of the ghettos, and rebuild beautiful buildings. And who's going to build those things and get paid to do it? The urban working class. They need the money, right? But we're going to be tearing up their homes. So what should we do in the process? Build them new homes, pay them money, and then the government will offer them subsidized low interest rate loans so they can buy those homes that they're building for themselves. It's brilliant. It's truly brilliant. So he's setting up that idea in those pamphlets, and so the people are going to overwhelmingly elect him and love him. All right, so he'll be elected into office in December of 1848. He will set up the Second Republic. Now, what he said with this Second Republic is that the government needs to serve the interests of the people. Needs to serve the interests of the people. All right, why is this different from anything that we've seen since the French Revolution?
Because they're only allowed for power and stuff.
Okay, so we had previous guys like Louis XVIII, and then especially Charles X, that they were in it for themselves, right? And then you had after that Louis Philippe. He was on the side of only the bourgeoisie, and he didn't work out so well either. So we've got this government that had not served the needs of all the people, and now what Napoleon wants to do is serve the needs of all the people. So Louis Napoleon is working to create this government in which they're inspiring national unity and unifying all of France despite any class antagonism, and to set forth on a process of progress in which they're rebuilding France and making it beautified and paying people to do it in the process, and then helping stimulate the economy with government influence. Because he figured if the government's uninvolved in the economy, then the economy will turn into this capitalistic thing where people like the working class get oppressed. Does he want to see that? No, because that creates the class antagonisms that brought about problems in 1848. So he wants the government involved, but not to the extent that we have socialism. So we're going to bring about a National Assembly under this idea. And so the National Assembly, they were much more conservative-leaning. Even though the working class were voting through universal male suffrage, we still had a lot of upper middle-class bourgeoisie getting elected. And these guys wanted to do things like reassert the church into every aspect of secular life. So they wanted to re-empower the church, which, works for some people, but not for everybody. And then they also wanted to start limiting voting rights. They wanted to curb the ability for the working class to vote because they were afraid they'd bring in a radicalism. So, Napoleon, not really liking this idea, right? So he was trying to talk to the National Assembly, saying, hey guys, this isn't working so well, we're going to have another revolution, but they wouldn't listen. So what did he do? What?
Get rid of them.
A coup d'etat! Exactly. Is this sounding familiar? Anyone? Yes. What did Napoleon Bonaparte do? A coup d'etat against the Directory and the Legislative Assembly because they were a bunch of suckers, right? All right, so he had his coup d'etat in Brumaire, or November of 1799. And then here, coup d'etat we're going to have on December the 2nd of 1851. All right, anyone know what's significant about this date?
The same one Napoleon.
Yes, all right. So on December the 2nd of, let's see, it was 1804, if I'm not mistaken? Yeah, 1804. Napoleon Bonaparte crowned himself emperor on that day in history. And so here we have the anniversary of that date. So you see how Louis Napoleon is really trying to play to that Napoleonic legend a bit? I mean, he's specifically choosing that date to stage his lovely little coup d'etat and take over the government. Yes, Keely?
I don't understand the coup d'etat. Because
So-
I was confused when I was reading it too. Like, it seemed like he was already in power, and then why would he?
He was in power, but so what he's doing is he's using his popular appeal to not suspend democracy, because the National Assembly, what they wanted to do was suspend democracy, right? Remove the vote from the people. What he's going to do is say, all right, these guys are a bunch of chumps that are trying to take away democracy. So in a way, he's using democracy to take away their inability to promote democracy. Does that make sense at all? So he's reasserting himself as a stronger ruler, removing a burden to his power, but at the same time, somehow, promoting greater democracy for the people.
Coup d'etat in a normal sense.
It's basically he's suspending the National Assembly, kicking them out, and then having his own power, right? So you'd think that's undemocratic, but at the same time, he's still allowing universal male suffrage. Does that make sense? Okay, so he's kicking out all the conservatives, basically. Yes?
Is there still like a Napoleon like family of today, like
I don't know.
direct descendants?
I'll give you extra credit if you find out for me. Yeah, I know there's still descendants of the Capetian dynasty. I know that because, what was his name? Not Sean. Chris Meyer. You guys remember Chris Meyer at all?
Yes.
Maybe? He was probably a senior when you were a freshman or something. His cousin married the final descendant of the Capetians, a young lady. And they went to a wedding in France, and he sent me this email a couple of years after he graduated. He's like, hey, guess what? I'm at a Capetian wedding. Well, jealous. You know, so, yeah. So he said he'd invite me next time. I don't think he will. But still. So, yeah, there you go. Yeah, I don't know about Napoleon. Find out. That would be interesting. All right, so Napoleon, he's going to set himself up a second empire. So pay attention to the goals that he's setting here and the ways that he's doing this. And be thinking, how would this inspire nationalism? How would this inspire popular enthusiasm for his rule? And what do other countries need to do in order to match this? Because if there's one thing that Napoleon III is going to be really good at, is at uniting his people and making himself look pretty awesome. Okay? So what he's going to do is first start with some economic changes, because in order to be popular in government, what do you got to have?
Money.
You got to have a strong economy. You got to have some money behind you, right? Because otherwise, if the economy's in shambles, everybody blames the leader. So he knew that. And so right away, he's going to start setting up investment banks. Why set up investment banks that are backed by the government? Or protected by the government? So what do you think?
Less hurt to the actual person.
Less hurt to the actual investor, exactly. Because if the bank goes belly up, before you'd lose all your money. Now, what's the government telling them?
You won't lose your money.
You'll lose what you invested, and then there may be even some insurance to protect you from losing more, or even pay you back for some of that, right? Because the government's going to protect some of those investment banks. All right, another thing they're going to do is set up massive railroad construction. So they will subsidize railroads. So what does that mean, to subsidize private industries like railroads? Help pay for it, or give very low interest loans or no interest loans to the fledgling industry. That way it can really start to boom, and you don't have to worry about all these taxes and such. So the government's going to help build railroads. Another thing they're going to do is set up all kinds of public works projects, and I'll show you some of those here in a little bit. But essentially, tear down the ghettos and build up a new Paris. And they're going to do this in other parts of France as well that need it. It's primarily in Paris, because that's where the most working class poor are living. Then we're also going to rebuild Paris. There you go, just talked about that. So rebuilding Paris to beautify it, because it is the capital of a second empire under Napoleon III. Next, they're going to set up pawn shops that are being regulated at this time. All right, any ideas as to why you would want to regulate pawn shops?
Some people.
So like it's illegal.
All right, so let's think of a pawn shop at this time, right? So we don't have credit cards at this time, right? So if you are a working class poor person and you need some money, you need some quick cash, where do you go?
Go steal something upon.
You can go steal something. Or you go to the pawn shop, right? You take some of your stuff. I mean, both then and now, if you need some quick cash, you take your stuff to the pawn shop and you give it to the pawn person, and then they give you cash, right? If you want your stuff back, what do you have to do? You have to buy it back with what? Interest. So essentially what they're going to do is they're going to, let's say, I'm going to take my bike. All right, so, they've got bicycles at this time. They're gargantuan bicycles with huge front tires and tiny little back tires. So let's say I take my gargantuan bicycle to a pawn shop. I, get $100 for it or 100 francs for it. And the pawn guy says, all right, well, I'm going to keep this in the back closet for the next month. You have 1 month to pay me back, and I'm going to charge you interest for each day that you don't pay me back. So if you want this thing back, you got to pay me, say, 35% interest on $100. Woo! All right, so am I losing some serious cash there?
Yeah.
Indeed, but if I need that cash on a loan, I can do it by pawning my bike. Now, the government, they don't like to see 35% interest rates on pawn shops because that's significantly hurting the working class poor who need to use these pawn shops. So by regulating the pawn shop and making it, say, 12%, does that certainly help out the working class?
Yes.
Big time! All right, good. So, and then another thing they're going to do is set up credit unions and better housing projects for the working class. That's what WC means, working class. So credit unions, very similar to the pawn shop idea, except on this occasion, what do you not have to give them? Yeah, you don't have to give them collateral, like your bicycle. You do not have to give them your bicycle in exchange for the money. You just take out a loan from a credit union, and then the government backs that, so that way if you default on your loan, the bank doesn't lose everything, because the government's going to hook them up. But in the event that you want to pay it back, you get a low interest rate, right? So it's going to work out real well for the working class so they can afford to live in new homes and new apartments. Another thing they're going to guarantee is the workers' right to strike and form unions as well. Why is this a big deal in the 1860s? Exactly. All right, and then plus, even in America, in the early 1860s, had we even guaranteed the right of unions or the right to strike?
No.
No, that didn't come about until really the 1880s and 90s, and that came through a lot of problems in the process. And you had, remember the Pinkertons? Anything about them? The Pinkertons came in and they smashed up a bunch of unions and broke some faces and to put down strikes. So now you are legally able to do that, which is a socialist idea. So the middle class is like, whoa, I don't know if I like that. But Napoleon says, tough cookies, buddy, because otherwise we're going to have some 1848 again, and you might get killed. Another change that he's going to make are some political changes. He's going to start making it so that the National Assembly is going to be elected every 6 years by universal male suffrage. So the goal for this is that we have, fairly frequent change, fairly frequent turnover. Why is that a good thing, to have fairly frequent turnover? It's not every year, because that would be bad. You couldn't get anything done. But every 6 years. Why do that?
Because that way, if someone doesn't like what someone's doing, they can change it.
Yeah, exactly. And not getting too much power either. In the previously elected National Assembly, they thought they were there for staying. They thought they were there to stay, right? So they figured they didn't need to listen to the people anymore. And so they brought in conservative measures. And what did Napoleon do in response on December the 2nd, 1851? Threw them out! Exactly. Threw them out! All right, so therefore, he's letting them know, hey, buddy, you are responsible to the will of the people. And then now they're going to say, all right, well, we better listen and actually make some good reforms. So another thing he's going to do is liberalize his empire by doing things like helping out the voters through some urban projects. And so we'll see some urban planning projects here. Paris in 1850 was a labyrinth of all these middle-aged types of streets. You had these overcrowded slums, these ghettos all over the place. And then if you look at it from the government perspective, though, it's not just that they want people living cleaner and healthier lives, right? Because you remember the air quality in towns from the Middle Ages until this time? What was it like? It was absolutely terrible. Plus industry. What was industry doing all around Europe at this point? Polluting the air. Okay, good example of this. I don't know if Doc Wines ever told you about this, but this was something that they studied in England, but it was certainly happening in France too. The air quality, for instance, around Manchester in the 1850s and 60s was so bad that all of this soot would cover trees all over the city, right? And so you'd have a literally blackened city. Now that was really bad for the monarch butterflies that were living there and they were, having their habitat there because they were easily viewable by predators. So over the course of a few decades, what did those butterflies' wings start to do? They turned black. They started to turn, as they're being born, they had darker and darker and darker shades of colors in their wings. So you had these really dark-looking butterflies so that they could blend in with their environment, right? So, crazy, isn't it? So what's that tell you about the pollution of the time period? Really bad, exactly. And so, result being, here in France, they're thinking the same kind of thing. Hey, we got to clean up air quality. But, from the government perspective, why else do they want to fix this situation right here? What's this picture tell you?
Prettier.
Alright, so prettier because we have an empire and we want to look good diplomatically if we're the seat of diplomacy in Europe. But what else? Look at this situation.
Well, I was gonna say maybe they want to make it so that the army can travel easier.
Yes, army can travel easier. And what else can you prevent? Think Les Mis again here.
Oh,
Prevent barricades. All you got to do is tip over this curtain and then boom, you've got yourself a seat of resistance. You've got yourself a position of armed resistance against the government if need be. So they want to widen the streets like crazy. The man that's going to be brought in to do it for Napoleon III is a guy named George Haussmann. So, George Haussmann is going to come in and start to fix up the town. So the goal here is to open and expand the city. You can see this, you see the debris right here? These used to be homes, and it went all the way up to this point. So you can see how narrow that street was before. And what have they done? Widened it dramatically, right? Is there any chance of forming a barricade here?
No.
Across a boulevard? No. Good luck with that, buddy. All right, and then next what they're going to do is, widen the streets. I'm just going to kind of throw these things down here while I'm talking about them. Widen the streets and then destroy the slums as well, clean them up a little bit. They're also going to improve sewer systems. Why in the 1860s do we need to improve the sewer systems? Yeah, you remember the poop smith. He's a busy man. He is a very busy man, cleaning up everyone's, defilement of the streets. Plus, not only are humans throwing their feces out the window, what else is making a mess every time they walk through the streets? Horses, right? Our main form of transportation at this time, if you are, upper class or middle class, what is it? A horse, and everywhere a horse goes, it takes a crap right there in front of your wagon, right? Constantly. So, if you want to keep that mess clean, you got to have a guy that's constantly moving that stuff out of the street, which is not easy, right? So just piles. And so now they're thinking, well, hey, let's get a sewer. That way you just kind of shuffle it to the side, throw it in the sewer, and then floats away. Okay, done. All right, next thing they're going to do is put in ringed roads and boulevards. All right, French term, boulevard. All right, so here you can see an example of it. We remember with the Middle Ages in Paris, we had these streets that were not the least bit planned out. It was, a labyrinth, right? An incredible labyrinth. What are we starting to do with these streets here? Square them off a bit. Now you've got these buildings that have been put in place that you want to keep because you've been to Paris. Tell us how beautiful it is. Yeah, you've been to Paris as well. Good. So tell us about it. It's gorgeous. Isn't that incredibly cool? You could just lay in the street and just be like, wow, this is the prettiest city in the whole world. So
They have a new bridge made out of trampolines.
Seriously?
Not far from the Eiffel Tower.
No.
These are like trampolines bigger than this room.
No.
There's like 8 of them like stretching across the river. It's so
Why
cool.
was that not there when I was there? That would have been so magnificent.
No, I didn't get one. I saw it on Twitter.
That'd be pretty awesome.
But my dad's going to Paris this weekend.
Have him check it out.
He's probably gonna go.
Get us a picture. I want to see that. All right, so you can see they're fixing the streets to move around the historic landmarks, but they also want to find a way to make them circular. So here, if you look closely, what's this called again? Arc de Triomphe, and it's celebrating the what? French Revolution and Napoleonic era, because Napoleon's like, yo, we need to celebrate how awesome we are. And so there you go, the Arc de Triomphe. Okay, and then here you've got a street that is circular here, and then all roads, what are they doing? Going to the Arc de Triomphe. All roads are celebrating the triumph of the French Revolution. Anyone know what this street is called right here? That's the Champs-Élysées. Champs-Élysées. All right, do you know what that means in French? I don't know what it means.
I don't know how to spell that.
It's just a cool word. All right, so Champs-Élysées right here. Now it's all these crazy, really expensive like shops and stuff. Like, I mean, there's a Fiat shop right there on the street where there's a car spinning in the window. I mean, just on this slow turn. And I was blown away. I've never seen anything like that. All right, but then you go down here a little bit, you take a right, and then here's where I was at one point. I rented a bicycle, and I rode around Paris for a day, and that's where I got stuck in traffic and nearly killed by a bunch of oncoming cars when I was going to the Bastille, right? So, you know, it's cool, though. You see the point here. They're ringing these roads. Now, what's the point besides just widening and ringing these roads? Okay, besides removing things like easier transportation. You gotta have an ease of transportation if you're going to be the diplomatic heart of Europe. They're also going to start bringing in public transportation because what's the problem with horses?
Poop everywhere.
They poop everywhere, and we have a beautiful city, and we want Fiats that are in the windows. We don't want stinking messes in front of those Fiats, right? We want a beautiful city, and they're going to add electricity to it. One of the first major cities in the world to have public transportation and electricity that is fueling that transportation. Then we're going to have parks and trees. Why?
Better air.
They're beautiful, and they provide better air quality. Before, they didn't have that, and all of a sudden, we're breathing better. Wow. Did you guys know in China today, they're actually having a lot of problems with their industrial revolution and with their air quality, and they're actually starting to sell air in a bottle. No joke.
No.
Just like the Lorax, right? No joke. Air in a bottle, fresh air that you can I can breathe again in Beijing. Okay. So, yeah. Maybe they need to build a few more parks and bring in the EPA,
With the
right?
Olympics there, like all like the long distance runners had to wear like masks.
Yep, because it's, I mean, they're essentially going through their version of the 1850s, right? With their industrial revolution right now. They're a bit behind. But, you know, you gotta hand it to them. They didn't get started until Mao came along in 1950. So yeah, they're 100 years behind. Yes.
You ever see that political cartoon about Beijing
No.
Olympics? Oh, it's like
You can't
one
breathe
that
at
has
all?
like the announcer. It's like, well, we're waiting for daylight to come to see how bad the smog is.
Yeah.
And she goes, oh wait, it's about noon.
Yeah, you can't even see the sun. Good one. All right, so now let's get to Italy. So, Italian unification right here. And Taryn's going to be fist bumping through the next couple slides, so feel free to start hooting and hollering, Taryn. So, the background here of Italy.
She's not Italian.
Oh. Really? Okay. Yeah. All right. If you've ever seen Vince, you'll know he's Italian.
My dad last year when he came in.
Yeah. Remember the World War II guy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew that.
He looks crazy Italian.
Okay. All right. So the background for Italy, ever since the 1490s, these guys have been the battleground for all the great powers. You got the Habsburgs always trying to come in. You got France always trying to come in. You've got the Germans that are even trying to do it. Ever since the Holy Roman Empire, you had powers trying to take over chunks of Italy. And then who do you have sitting in Rome that's like, oh, you can't do that every time?
The Pope.
The Pope. And so he's got his own vested interests in the land and the power in Italy. I mean, because he's involved in secular issues as well as religious ones at this time. Right? And so the Congress of Vienna is going to reorganize this thing because remember, which man, myth, and legend went into Italy and reorganized it by himself before? Napoleon! Bonaparte, not Napoleon III. All right, so Napoleon Bonaparte went in and reorganized it himself, basically unified it, subjugated the Pope, just with an iron fist, and then he put in a little liberal constitution setting himself up as protector of Italy. And then who did he set up as his absentee ruler? Obscene Pauline. Very good. Okay, so Obscene Pauline hanging out there in Italy, and then after that, they're going to kick him out, obviously, with the Congress of Vienna. And so they were trying to reassert the Habsburg rule in Italy. Isn't going to go very well. Because now we've got a bunch of people that want unification and want nationalism after 1815. So we have three different approaches to how to do this. The first is from a guy named Giuseppe Mazzini. What a cool name, right? An awesome name. All right, go ahead and say it with me. Giuseppe Mazzini! All right, so Giuseppe, he wanted to have a very, very liberal kind of idea. I mean, borderline radical, I would say, actually. Because he wanted a republic. Now remember, a republic at this time is pretty much a radical idea. America, we were starting to go towards a republic in the 1790s, obviously, and had that in the Constitution. And that was seen as pretty radical in Europe. But here we've got an Italian that wants to do that. And he wanted to have universal male suffrage on top of that. So this is a pretty radical idea. Who do you think was not enthusiastic about that one?
England.
The Pope or the conservative powers in the Congress of Vienna. Exactly. Anybody that's buddies with Metternich would hate this idea. All right, so Mazzini and his ideas are going to be suppressed over the next 3 decades. Then we've got a guy named Vincenzo Gioberti. So Vincenzo, he was a priest. Okay, and so right away, what kind of ideas is he going to be coming up with? You think? Are very a bit more conservative and definitely Catholic leaning ideas. So Vincenzo Gioberti came up with a federation. Okay, what's the difference between a republic and a federation? Any ideas? Okay, so a federation. Okay, so we do have a centralized government, right? We have a presidency. It's very similar to what we see under the U.S. Constitution, because in the U.S. Constitution we have states that have their own power. Do we not? Montana has got its own state legislature, its own state constitution, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But then who's our president? Barakskis, exactly. All right, so you've got a federation similar to what we have in America at this time. He wanted to have a federation under the presidency of a pope, a progressive pope, he said, meaning that this pope would be in favor of nationalism. All right, that's definitely a big wish on his part, because the pope, very conservative, would he be a fan of this nationalism or this federation? No, the Pope didn't like that at all. Instead, he just wanted to have his own system and get rid of all these nationalistic ideas. And then finally, you've got Sardinia-Piedmont approach, which is led by Victor Emmanuel, quite possibly the greatest mustached man in all of all of the 19th century history. Look at that guy. Holy crap. The only guy that beats him in facial hair, I think, is General Burnside. That guy's pretty cool too. All right, so Victor Emmanuel, he's leading the tiny little country, quote unquote, of Sardinia-Piedmont. Okay, I'll show you the map here in a little bit, and we can see where that is. But what he did was he set up a liberal constitution. Remember, Sardinia-Piedmont, they were one of the first powers in Europe in 1848 to have a revolt, and they were working towards unification, but they were suppressed. But in the process, they did keep a progressive, but not a radical, constitution. What would that mean? Progressive, but not radical. Progressive meaning, who do we have? Do we have a president? President Victor Emmanuel? We have a king, right? But as king, what else does he have to put his power in somewhat of a check? Balance of powers. Checks and balances. Parliamentary. We've got checks and balances through a constitutional monarch, Victor Emmanuel, and then he would allow some voting rights. He might allow universal suffrage, but at this time that's a little too radical. So he said, all right, we'll just have limited voting rights. So that's a liberal constitution, right? So he had a pretty good idea of how to run things here so that it didn't tick off everyone, but he was able to get the lower classes' support. But then the Pope, throughout all of this, was opposed to every last bit of it. The Pope, actually, a guy named Pius IX, wrote up a little thing called the Syllabus of Errors in 1864. The Syllabus of Errors was a pamphlet that he had published all over Italy. And what do you think he's criticizing here?
Everyone.
Everyone. Yeah, so essentially, nationalism. Does he like it?
No.
No. Does he like unification? No. Does he like radicalism or liberalism? No and no. He wants Italy status quo. He's essentially hobnobbing with Metternich at this point, but Metternich's gone. So he's hobnobbing with all the conservative powers of Europe at this time, saying, yeah, let's keep things the way they are. It's awesome. All right. Most of the Italians, would they agree? Taryn, would they agree? No! Because they love the Pope religiously, but secularly, what do they want?
Change.
Change! What kind of change? And the N-word. The good N-word. The good N-word. Yes. Nationalism! Okay. Shoot, that's going on YouTube too. Okay. So, unification and the good N-word, nationalism! That's right! All right. Yeah, okay. So, that brings us to how they did it. So, the man that's working for Victor Emmanuel, he was the Prime Minister of Sardinia-Piedmont. No, sorry, I gotta get going if you want to take the quiz again. Okay, so the Prime Minister of Sardinia-Piedmont, who was that man? Emmanuel Cavour! Good thing I didn't put that on the quiz. So Emmanuel Cavour is the leader, the Prime Minister to Victor Emmanuel in what country? Quote-unquote country? Sardinia-Piedmont, exactly. All right, so Cavour, what he wants to do is find a way to unify this. Well, hold on a second. Uh-oh. My map got screwed up again. Give me a sec. Oh, hate it when this happens. Remember when I update my system, it always does this to me. No. There we go. Much better. Because I was going to be like, oh, look at Sardinia-Piedmont. But I couldn't because it wasn't showing up. Yeah, there we go. Okay, very good. So, Sardinia and Piedmont, where are they on the map? What color? Light green. So here's Sardinia. Here is Piedmont. That's the capital, right there. That is the capital. And so they are coming up with a plan here under Emmanuel Cavour. And Emmanuel Cavour was prime minister to whom? All right, Victor Emmanuel. All right, so there's a little thing called the Crimean War going on in 1855. Who's fighting in it? Russia. Who's getting owned in it? Russia. All right, so Crimean is how I don't want to pronounce it. So in the Crimean War, Russia decided to attack some Ottoman Turk possessions that were in the Holy Land. Okay, excuse me, it was not in the Holy Land, but they viewed it as a holy site. And so the Ottoman Turks didn't like it. Now Russia, they were thinking this whole time, hey, all of Europe, the Christian powers are going to agree with me, right? If I go and take all of this land from the dirty Turks. Wait a second. All right. So how do the Europeans feel about the balance of power? They want it.
They love it.
They love it. Okay, so if Russia decided to destroy the Ottoman Turk Empire, would that upset the balance of power in southeastern Europe?
Yes.
Yes, because the Ottoman Turks are holding which major behemoth with 12 time zones in check? Russia, exactly. So therefore, do they want Russia to win? No! So, I mean, much to the indignation of Russia here, no one was on their side. They thought the exact opposite would happen. No one was on their side. Everybody fought against Russia, and they were 100 years behind technologically at this point, militarily speaking. So, did it go well for Russia? No, they got destroyed. Why did Cavour and Sardinia and Piedmont, with a tiny little army, decide to get involved in this thing?
Maybe gain more. It's land.
All right, so they weren't necessarily, I mean, land would have been a good thing, but just the fact that they would be at the discussion table at the end is a big deal, isn't it? So they wanted to be on the winning side, knowing that they could get diplomatic recognition if that were the case, and maybe even get some land out of it. So why do you need diplomatic recognition?
So you can unify Italy better.
Yeah, because if they're not recognized as being a sovereign state, will anyone ever talk to them or listen to them for any reason?
No.
If they decide to go and attack Rome, for instance, which would be a bad idea, right? But if they decide to go and attack Rome or Lombardy or Venetia or Tyrol, not having diplomatic recognition, would they be able to win? Because what would everyone else do to them?
Team up.
Crush them! Team up! Exactly. But now they're trying to get into some alliances. So, what they're going to do is in 1859, they will unify Sardinia, Piedmont with northern and central Italy. They're going to start to move into Lombardy, Venetia, and Tyrol, which is going to tick off which power, do you think?
Austria.
Austria, because who owns Tyrol, for instance? Austria, exactly. All right, so what they're going to have to do is bring about a little thing that Cavour called the Risorgimento. What does the Risorgimento mean in Italian? Resurgence. And so, according to Cavour, what is the Italian resurgence? We haven't gone to war with Austria yet, right? But what's he trying to do here? The Italian resurgence. Under Rome, what were they? Were they unified?
Yes.
Under the Roman Empire, were they unified?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Were they awesome?
Yeah.
Did they have, considering the time period here, fairly liberal ideas, meaning we had a republic with a leader at the top? Absolutely. So, what's he want to do?
Do the same.
Do the same! Exactly. So, he's got to get a Risorgimento going. In order to do that, he's going to have to take on the Habsburgs. Is this a tough thing to do as tiny little Sardinia Piedmont?
Yes.
Indeed! So, who are we going to have to talk to get some help? France! Why would France support Sardinia and Piedmont in their war against Austria?
They don't like Austria.
They don't like Austria either, exactly. And they're thinking, well, hey, wouldn't it be good to have an ally on my southeastern border, especially in the event that I go to war against Austria, who, of course, is sitting on the throne in France at this time in the Second Empire? Napoleon III. So Italy's going to go talk to Napoleon III and say, hey, guys, how about you get on our side here and we go attack Austria and you back us up and you send in some armies too. And Napoleon III's like, yeah, totally, let's do this thing. Right at the moment that Sardinia and Piedmont was beginning to attack against Austria, Napoleon III, talked to the Pope, and the Pope was not enthusiastic about this plan. And so Napoleon III said, no, thanks, but no. And so it backed out at the last moment. Oh, man, that's kind of sucker punch, isn't it? Yeah, it's so, all right, not very nice. All right, so he backs out at the last moment. But despite that fact, how did Sardinia and Piedmont do? They did pretty good. All right, they didn't win the stunning victory they were hoping for with French support, but they did pretty darn good, all things considered. And so, therefore, they're proving to everyone in Europe, hey, We can be tough cookies. We can be tough cookies if we want to. All right, and so Austria is kind of a little bit more fearful now about their enemy to their western border. And so this is when nationalism really starts to take hold. Because we had a southern Italian from Sicily. You see Sicily there is off the toe of the boot, right? So we had a southern Italian from Sicily, a guy by the name of Giuseppe Garibaldi. Let's all say that one with some enthusiasm. Ready? Yeah, we'll do it on three. We'll do it on three, because you really got to feel the name. You don't just say it, you feel it. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Giuseppe Garibaldi! All right. You guys remember from the book Bread and Wine?
Yeah, it was the
Garibaldi.
There you go. Yeah, so when we're christening the donkey, you'd always, Garibaldi! You'd hit him, and that way he knows his name is Garibaldi. Why would you name your donkey Garibaldi?
strong.
Because he's awesome. He's strong, indeed. So, Giuseppe Garibaldi, he was a radical nationalist. All right, so why is this maybe, a strike against him in terms of what Austria or France would think? Huh? What do you think? Radical nationalist. Okay, yeah, duh, self-explanatory. All right, so radical nationalist here. He's not going to be on the good side of many conservative powers at this time, but he was set on a mission of national liberation. He wanted Mazzinian republicanism, meaning a unified Italian state that would be sovereign without the religious, I guess you could say the religious power of the Pope dominating secular issues, and he wanted to have universal male suffrage, and the people in southern Italy, who were primarily poorer working class types, how did they feel about it? What do you think? They what? They loved it! Indeed, they were like, this guy is a god among men! Let's do this thing! So they followed him gloriously as he took his 1,000 red shirts on an expedition towards Rome. They were just on the outskirts of Rome in May of 1860, and they were planning to attack Rome, sack Rome, and take the Pope prisoner if necessary in order to have a unified Italian republic. And then all of a sudden, everyone starts thinking, holy crap. If we let this guy attack Rome, first, how's Victor Emmanuel and Cavour going to feel about it?
No.
All right, was Cavour stupid enough to attack Rome and, subjugate the Pope? No, because then who would get ticked off about it?
France.
Well, all of the Catholics around Europe would hate that, wouldn't they? And so, if we have Giuseppe Garibaldi actually sacking Rome, all of Europe will be against them, won't they?
Yeah.
So what does Cavour and Victor Emmanuel, what are they going to have to do? Stop him. But do they want to suppress that nationalism?
No.
No, because it's a good thing, too, for unification. So, we'll have this beautiful moment, September of 1860, on a bridge, as so the legend goes anyway, on the bridge leading into Rome, you've got Giuseppe Garibaldi and his army starting to slowly progress into Rome, ready for the attack. And that's when Victor Emmanuel rode out to talk to Giuseppe Garibaldi and tell him, hey, we need to do this the right way. We need to do this slowly. We need to do this through a process of diplomacy and unification that will not tick off all of Europe and not tick off the Pope. Because otherwise, it will never last. And so therefore, what's Garibaldi going to do? He's going to say, all right, I'll trust you. He will turn around and go back home to Sicily. So, what they're going to be able to do then is progressively and slowly start to use that popular nationalism and slowly unite Italy. So they're going to use diplomacy. They're going to use talks with the Pope in order to make sure that this thing happens for them without upsetting him and all of the Catholics around Europe. But what will it take in order to fully unify Italy? What's France going to do in 1871? 70 and 71. Going to fight someone who they can fight.
Oh, that's the Franco-Prussian.
The Franco-Prussian War, indeed! So they're going to be fighting Otto von Bismarck! And so the Italians sense an opportunity. Who stabbed him in the back in 1859? France did, exactly. And so they're thinking, well, wait a second, Napoleon, you kind of screwed us over. Who are they going to go and talk to then? Prussia and Otto von Bismarck! And so in exchange for their support in the war, in exchange for their neutrality in the war, what is Otto von Bismarck going to grant them in 1871? Unification. So the same year that Germany is unified, what else will be unified? Italy! Indeed. So the Franco-Prussian War will unite Italy. Beautiful. All right, so Garibaldi, he is going to step down. He'll serve as a temporary leader, but he's going to step down and allow Cavour to make Italy a parliamentary-style government, with Victor Emmanuel III being the new king. And they're going to use the Constitution of 1848, that fairly liberal constitutional monarchy, and set that up as the rule for all of this newly united Italy. Beautiful! All right, so that's, so we've seen France, we've seen Italy. Who do we got to talk about next? Germany! All right, so let's go to Prussia. So this is Germany before Bismarck, and that should be quote-unquote Germany because we don't have unification yet. But, we have some issues post-1848. We've got this political stalemate from 1848 because how did Frederick William IV feel about this process of unification in 1848 that they came up with at the Frankfurt Parliament? Did he like the idea of an elected monarchy with universal male suffrage and all these liberal ideas? No! He liked the idea of being king of a united German empire. But what was his big qualm about it? What was his big qualm? Alright, didn't want to take it from the gutter. Very nice. Alright, you quoted him, so yes. Alright, so would not take that crown from the gutter. And so what he wants to do is have unification from above. Meaning he will not allow the people to be the ones to unify Germany, but he wants to use his own methods of either war or diplomacy to do it. And that's primarily because of the failed reforms of 1848 and the failed revolution. But meanwhile, what's he got going on economically and culturally that's helping to slowly unify, quote-unquote, Germany? Remember the German Confederation of the Rhine? What did they have going on economically that was helping them to put aside their differences?
No tariff.
No tariffs. Okay, what was that called? The
Zollverein.
Zollverein! All right, first again, yes. Booyah, 2 in a row. So, the Zollverein, we have a German customs union, who's this power right here. You notice that they're in chunks here, aren't they? What's this power again? Prussia, very good. And then we've got Hanover, we've got Mecklenburg, we've got Holstein. You heard about them earlier. All right, we'll see them again here soon. We've got Saxony, we've got Thuringia. I've never even been able to pronounce that one, but so yeah, Thuringia. Then you've got Bavaria, you've got Württemberg, and Baden. Okay, so these groups all putting aside their differences economically, putting aside their tariffs. Who do you notice is left out as the, disgruntled stepchild here of Europe? Austria. But wait a second. Austria, culturally, aren't they German?
Yes.
Well, at least the ruling classes, the Habsburgs, aren't they a German culture?
Yes.
Yeah, they speak German. They sprechen Sie Deutsch. And so are they feeling very good about being left out of this thing?
No.
Nine! Okay, they don't like it at all. They're constantly like, oh, can we join this all right? No! Please, can we join it? No! Okay, so because of that, we've got this idealistic support of unification coming from the German Confederation of the Rhine, from this Zollverein. But we've got tension with that poor little stepchild being left out of this lovely little union. So Austria, not pleased. What are we kind of setting the stage for with this? Possible war, indeed. So a possible war with Austria. Oh, stay tuned. Okay, so this thing's building for about 3 decades before it finally erupts. Or excuse me, 2 decades before it finally erupts. Now, another man with glorious facial hair. I mean, he's got more emphasis on the sideburns than he does on the mustache here. But Wilhelm I. You can call him William I. Or you can call him, what's the German way of saying it? Wilhelm. Okay, so Wilhelm I, he is king at this point, and what he wants to do is put aside all the diplomacy crap and all the conservatism stuff and start bringing in militarism. Why? Why bring in militarism? Is this a new thing for Prussia?
No.
No. All right, so you remember Friedrich Wilhelm I and Friedrich the Great, right? Friedrich II. They were very militaristic men that expanded Prussia through military might. So, Frederick William III and IV couldn't do it, and so now we've got Wilhelm I saying, you know what? We were successful before with the military, we will be successful again with the military. So he's going to expand it. But meanwhile, we've got this parliament set up from 1848 in Prussia that are saying, you know what? We're a bunch of wealthy middle-class types. We don't like war. We like rainbows and butterflies and business. We like factories, right? Okay, so they want to see war happening here?
No.
Because, I mean, war can help the economy, if you win, right? But what can war also do to your factories and your wealth and your power? Destroy it. And so far, I mean, since Napoleon, how has Prussia been doing with war? Not so good. All right, since Frederick the Great, not so good. Okay, it was great under him, but otherwise not so good. And so now the middle class, they're thinking, no, we're not going to let that happen. And so we're going to block all of your military budgets that you try and put through our parliament. What's it going to take to push these cads aside and start to bring in some awesome military reforms? A coup d'etat could be used, right? Could be used. But instead, it's going to take one incredible chancellor who's going to push out the middle class, show them what's what, through nationalism, through war, and prove to them that might makes right. Who's that man?
Bismarck.
Bismarck! All right, Otto von Bismarck. He is the chancellor of the what?
German.
The Reichstag. Okay, so the Reichstag is what we call the German parliament at this time. Why call it a Reichstag? Let's all say that together. You gotta try and roll your R a little bit too. Ready? Reichstag. Yeah, all right. So why call it a Reichstag?
Second.
Okay, because we're moving towards that second German Reich. Exactly. And who was the first?
Oh, Charlie.
Charlemagne, indeed. Ugh, you got a pen there. Yeah, okay. All right, and who will the third Reich be? Okay, yeah. Duh. All right, so Otto von Bismarck. He is a glorious man in history. There's that man, myth, and legend looking at you right there. Pretty awesome. So if we take a look at his diplomatic career, I've got some quotes for you, some great quotes for you that should inspire you as we progress through the rest of the semester. So in his diplomatic career, he always said that one must always have two irons in the fire. What does that mean? One must always have two irons in the fire. Alright, you always have your guns ready. And you always, you can use peace on one side, but then on the other side, be ready for war. Or if one diplomatic plan doesn't work, what do you always have prepared? Another backup diplomatic plan, exactly. So, essentially the same thing for a bunch of seniors that are trying to get through all of their multiple AP classes, right? It's like, I've always got my Euro iron in the fire, occasionally the other ones, right? Oh, that's idealistic. That's idealistic. Okay. All right, he also said, might makes right! Why is he right? In this time period, anyway.
Because the bigger man wins.
Yeah! All right. So, the bigger the military might, the better the right. Oh, man, he's going to be doing some awesome things, too. All right. Now, does he want to wait on politicians to figure things out and pass bills that, enact reform and all that slow process, arduous things? No! Do we solve the problems of the day through speeches and resolutions?
No.
How do we solve them?
War.
Through blood and iron. Oh, man, I love this quote. All right, part of the reason I love it so much is first year of teaching AP Euro, 6 years ago, it was the day of the exam, and as every good Euro student should do, on that day, every single Euro student skipped the first part of school because they knew that their test wasn't until 11:45, and they knew they shouldn't go to their other classes because that would just be stupid. What?
You could put 5 blood and iron on.
Well,
5 blood and iron.
hey, I'll ask. That would be awesome. I'll ask Mr. Keenan and see if we can do it. All right, that's good actually, because on that day I was in the middle of fourth period. It's like 5 minutes before the test starts, and in comes Charlie Ray. You guys remember him at all? Yeah. So Charlie Ray comes flying in here, and he in the middle of my U.S. history class just shouts the quote. Just says, "The great questions of the day will not be decided by speeches and resolutions, but by blood and iron." And then he just walked out. I mean, how cool is that, right? How cool is that? And then he aced the exam, got a 5. So, kudos. All right, so that's maybe setting the stage for you guys, just thinking about that as you're moving towards the test here. All right, so he's going to build Prussian strength. He's going to get things going here for the Prussian state by building up the military. He will become chancellor in 1862, and he's going to face all kinds of parliamentary opposition. Right? So when you've got parliamentary opposition that's blocking your taxes so that you can't raise money for military reforms or for war, what do you do if you're Otto von Bismarck? You say, to heck with you, cats. Hey, have fun passing your bills. I'm going to collect illegal taxes to fund my military, and after we win the war, you can be the first on the front lines if you want to, or you can support my bills. Huh? All right, so the middle class, they're like, whoa, this is different. All right, I guess we'll just support your bills then, buddy. Okay, so it worked. It worked brilliantly, in fact. All right, so thank God we don't have that happening in America too much. But, maybe things would get done. I don't know. Maybe things would get done if we had that. So, at the time period, though, yes, that makes him awesome. We'll see that he's going to do some great things here against those that wanted to resist him. So, what's his first war of unification going to be? Remember, we had a little area that Denmark said they owned, even though it was not their territory. And Nathan's saying it, but I'm going to wait for everybody else. Anyone? All right, thank you, Nathan. So, the war over Schleswig-Holstein. All right, so Schleswig-Holstein. Remember, Holstein, this was a part of which union again? Holstein? It was a part of The Zollverein, right? The Zollverein. Who claimed that they had some precedence here? All right, Denmark. They also claimed that they owned Schleswig, which is to the north of the Ostit Canal, right? And so they think that they own this stuff. And so Bismarck's like, no, thanks, guys, you don't. So he's going to go to war with Schleswig-Holstein. And how's Austria going to feel about it?
No.
They're not going to like it. They're going to be like, oh, wait a second. Because remember, they've been feeling left out for a while, right? So they're like, oh, wait a second, Prussia, you can't do that because we want to help you. Please let us help you. We're going to help you in this war. Now, why did they help them? Did they actually think they'd get some of that territory? What were they thinking they could do? Prevent Prussia from gaining those territories, quiz answer. They thought they could prevent Prussia from gaining those territories by joining in the alliance to get Schleswig-Holstein. So they were sincerely thinking that they would be a part of the brokerage deal and that they would get part of the land and then push out Prussia from getting any of it. Did that work real well?
No.
No, because as soon as the war was over, what was Bismarck able to take for himself? All of it! All right, and so Austria pushed out of that deal. All right, and so Austria, again, they're like, oh, dang it. They just keep beating us. Oh, man, we're just getting left out. We have a lot of guns. What should we do? Attack! Attack! Good idea to attack Otto von Bismarck?
No.
Bad idea. All right, it'll be a 6-week war. Okay, so a 7-week war. Because Austria will attack Prussia here, and, well, at least Prussia will make it look like Austria attacked. Really, Bismarck was ready for this thing from the get-go. So in the Austro-Prussian War, what Bismarck realized is he had to take this power on one at a time. Because any time that you have a European war at this point, it's never just one power against the other, is it?
No.
What do we always have happening? An alliance, multiple alliances, because all the cousins are married throughout Europe, right? I mean, all these kings and queens of Europe are all cousins somehow, and that's why they've got all these bloodline issues. But so they're all cousins somehow, and so he figured, you know what? I got to keep all the other cousins out of this thing. I got to make sure that it's just us and just us against Austria. And so that's what he did. He made sure this was a localized conflict. He cut some deals with other powers around Europe, like England and France. He actually had was buddies with France for this time period, and saying, hey guys, you stay out of this because we're going to take care of it. Kept Russia out of the deal as well. And so how's that going to work out for Austria?
Yeah.
Not good. It's going to take 7 weeks for Prussia to destroy the Austrian ranks. All right, why? Why was Prussia so much better at this war? What did they have that Austria did not? Number one thing.
Mustaches.
All right, mustaches. The Austrians had mustaches, which kind of helped in battle. Made them impervious to Prussian gunfire. Yeah,
Automatic.
they were. Yeah.
Automatic rifle.
Okay, so they did have some good weaponry, but we'll see the number one thing that the Prussians had going for them was they were quick. They had rapid mobilization thanks to railroad technology. They've been building railroads like crazy for the last few decades. Had Austria been building railroads? Was Austria really industrialized at all to begin with?
No.
Not really. A little bit in the north, but otherwise not really. So, they also had some better weapons as well. So here you see some glorious cannons. Any ideas what made these cannons better?
They didn't go back.
They're not as heavy. So they're smaller cannons, and they were, I mean, yeah, you had to be closer to get some good fire on them, but with smaller, more movable cannons, you had better accuracy as well, because what kind of barrels did they have?
Longer.
Rifled barrels, okay, and so they're also moving towards breech-loading cannons at this time. What's a breech-loading cannon?
From the rear.
From the rear, exactly. So, able to fire it much more rapidly that way. So their weapons were just far superior. Then you had a breech-loading musket as well. So I think this was the Krupp rifle, if I'm not mistaken, that they were using. And so the Krupp rifle, what do you know about it? Anybody? First of all, it's a rifle, meaning what? All right, rifling. I'll say, okay, so it's more accurate with the firepower. It's also a little bit shorter barrel than what you'd see with like a musket, what the more of the Austrians were carrying. So it's more accurate than the Austrian guns. It's shorter, so it's therefore what? Lighter and more, maneuverable, right? They also had at the end of them, in the event that you get close enough, what do you have? A bayonet on the end of the barrel. And then what's this all about? It's a bolt action, exactly. So you can fire these things rapidly. You go firing like crazy. Whereas the Austrians, what do they have to do after they fire a shot? Oh yeah, okay. All right, not going real well for them at all in the field of battle. And then we've got the Prussian General Staff under Helmut von Moltke. All right, let's say that one too. You got to get that angry tone because German When you speak German, it always sounds angry, even if you're talking about the weather, right? Even if you're like, das ist ein Hundewetter, it just sounds angry, you know. All right, so let's go ahead and say that one with a fun little angry tone. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Helmut von Moltke! Yeah, so Helmut von Moltke, he is the leader of the Prussian General Staff. Tell me about the Prussian General Staff. What makes them awesome? They are not a diplomatic tool, for those of you that chose that answer. So they are not an appendage of diplomacy. What do they do though? Okay, they were well trained. They looked at historic campaigns from other countries that had fought in the past, and so what did they say about that? Hey, this is what France did against Austria that one time. What should we do?
Same thing.
Whatever worked. Do the same thing. Whatever worked. Exactly. Oh, hey, this is how Napoleon got through the Alps. So how should we do it?
Same thing.
Like what he did, or make it better. All right, and so this is what worked against Austria. When we attacked them with our railroads, what should we do? Oh, I guess that we just did that. I was looking at the Franco-Prussian War. Excuse me, getting ahead of myself. All right, what else did they do with the railroads?
Build lots of them.
Well, they not only built them, but they managed the timetables for these. They micromanaged the railroads so that they knew exactly the timetables of everything. So you knew exactly when the railroad was going to go through Bavaria, because what might you need to put on that railroad?
Soldiers.
Soldiers and supplies. So they had the logistical campaign tied down perfectly. So these guys did everything. They even played live war games, right? With live ammunition. They wouldn't shoot each other, but they would get close. So they know what they're doing in the field of battle. And the Austrians, did they have that?
No.
No. So tell me about the peace terms. After Otto von Bismarck and Helmut von Moltke completely owned Austrian warfare and totally embarrassed them. I mean, you can imagine how red their faces were after losing after 7 weeks, right? So, how do you think the peace terms are going to be? Bitter and angry or nice?
Bitter and angry.
Nice. Why would they be nice to Austria?
Oh, because they want them on their side.
Okay, they want them on their side now, essentially, as they are uniting the rest of the empire. So, essentially, they went up to him and slapped him several times in the face and then kicked him a few times in the shins and then said, oh, hey, buddy, it's all good. Don't be angry anymore. We're friends now, right? We're cousins. You're German, we're German, it's all good, but you're not a part of our empire because you suck. All right, so, first of all, there's no reparations. Why is that a good thing for Austria? No reparations. They got to pay for this war?
No.
Typically in war, what do you got to do after you lose?
Pay
For it, but they're not going to have to pay for it. That's a big deal. Also, there's no territorial loss. What? Why? Why would they be so nice as to allow Austria not to lose any land?
So when they unified Germany, they just be like,
Yeah, they'd be like, oh, we're taking land now, but, we didn't take any of yours, Austria, so there's no reason for you to be, ticked off or have a spirit of revanche. Okay, and then next they're going to say, well, hey, that whole German Confederation of the Rhine that you guys were such big fans of at the Congress of Vienna, gone. Sorry, you're not included in this system anymore. Now what we're going to have is German affairs in Germany. And who's going to lead that glorious area? We are. Prussia, exactly. So, as that's happening, though, the problem for Prussia is that the northern Protestant states, they love Prussia, right? So they're going to be a part of this thing, like those countries we saw in the Zollverein for the most part, except Bavaria, are going to be a part of this thing. But you still have a bunch of southern Catholic states that were like, hey, way to go, Prussia, but we don't want to be a part of your country. We kind of like being a principality. We like being Catholic, too, and we're afraid you're going to push Protestantism on us. So, what does Bismarck need to do if he wants to bring in those southern Catholic states? No, not become
Religious toleration.
All right, essentially. What else does he need to do? So he's got to bring in some liberalism, right? Allowing both religions to cohabitate. What else does he got to do? Inspire nationalism through another war, indeed. All right, so we're going to start by taming Parliament. So what they're going to do, we're just going to fly through this if you don't mind, because we're almost out of time. So, victory, they're going to bring in this idea that we're going to have this national development of Germany. And so they're throwing around the term Germany at this point, saying that all these principalities that were formerly, their own little state, or their own little principality, and their own sovereign nation, now we're going to bring them together as much as allowable. Because remember, some states were against this. So what they'll do initially is say, all right, we're going to have a northern confederation, a northern German confederation, with a federal constitution. So what does that mean? Confederation. Similar to America under the Articles of Confederation. What do we have? All right, so we've got these German states that are going to have, their own system, essentially, but who's at the top of this thing with a federal constitution?
Russia.
Okay, Prussia, and they're going to have elected representatives coming into what body? All right, and we call that what?
Reichstag.
The Reichstag. And then who's going to be the chancellor? Bismarck. And who's going to be his, the leader of this thing? Essentially the president? Wilhelm I. All right, very good. So we will have the chancellor, who is solely responsible to the president. In this case, Bismarck, being solely responsible to Wilhelm I, right? And then we're going to have a federal government that's going to control all aspects of the army and diplomacy. So therefore, can some random state like Hanover say, oh, hey, I want to do some diplomacy now? Can they do that?
No.
No! Who's the only person that can do diplomacy? People, excuse me.
Wilhelm.
Wilhelm and Prussia, and the Chancellor, Otto von Bismarck, right? They're the only ones who will be responsible for diplomacy. And then we're going to have a legislature elected by universal male suffrage. Why would they allow that?
So
Go-
everyone
Everyone can have a say, exactly. So again, we don't have the Catholic southern states like Bavaria on our side yet. What are they trying to do here by setting up a very liberal empire?
Oh, you can have
Be like, hey guys, you can come and join us. It's pretty awesome being in Germany. Pretty awesome being in Deutschland. So we'll stop there. I've got some more for you before we take the quiz. Did you get all that? Let me just stop my video here for a second. Then you can have it. Goodbye, YouTube.